Hey, salam and welcome to Mecca Collective. Today we are blessed to be speaking with a really exciting entrepreneur, Mariam Rehman, the co-founder of Monale and a partner in Habibi Chicken. And so today we're going to be exploring various aspects of her entrepreneurial journey. Mariam, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Let's get straight into it. So I guess the first question that I'd love to ask you is around your upbringing, because it was in an interesting place. So you grew up in Wagga Wagga, which is a town in regional New South Wales. And I'm
hmm
interested to hear about how that shaped where you are today and how it shaped your inspirations and your general direction.
Yeah, I was born in Wagga Wagga, which is 4.5 hours away from Melbourne and 4.5 from Sydney. So it's a sweet spot in between the two metropolitan cities in Australia. Um, I am the youngest of five, and there's a pretty big age gap between me and my siblings. So we're all, alhamdulillah, very close. So that also, I guess, reflects the kind of person that I am today. Um, but at the time when I was growing up, there was probably around 40,000 people, and in the majority, people were Caucasian. There weren't very many people who looked like me, and then there weren't many Muslims as well. So at that time, I would say my parents were heavily involved in the community, but the kind of community work that they did wasn't just only, for Muslims, but it was kind of like a lot of interfaith work, a lot of ensuring that we all integrated into society where we understood each other, where we respected our values, and where we didn't need to compromise our values. So it was pretty difficult because I guess a lot of kids of immigrant parents can understand where you have that identity crisis. And I definitely had that. I'm like, oh, I'm not Pakistani enough. But if I go to Pakistan, I'm into Australia. And so I was like, what am I? Where do I fit in? So that's that whole big story. But in saying that, one thing that was instilled within us as children was, having very good Islamic values, and knowing what was very important, but also having an importance and respect, I would say, towards our culture as well. So finding the sweet spot took some time, and I'll probably say till I got to university is when I really understood where I sat between my culture and my religion, and as an Australian. But it was definitely an interesting road. Like, I didn't have that many Muslim friends. I had like four, and we're still pretty good friends now, and everyone's kind of moved away, but we're still quite close. But in saying that, because of the tests that I faced as a child to an adult, I definitely needed those experiences to be more certain about who I am today. And I think if I was around more kids like me, then I wouldn't really have to question at a younger age. So I was faced with questions of, why Islam? Like, why do I do this? Why do I have to wear this and everyone else is wearing this? It's so hot. Like, I want to play sports, but they wear this. So there was, I was very heavily involved in sports. I used to be a sprinter when I was younger. And like, just dad would always take us fishing. We were all just outdoor kids. But in saying that, like, as you know, well, back then they were very archaic with their rules on what you were, especially girls, what they wore when you played sport. So I had a situation, and I would always wear skins and I was always covered up. And we were playing league tag in another city, and I remember the ref wouldn't let us start the game and stop the game because of me, because of what I was wearing. And he said, you have to take that off or you cannot play. And and everyone's like, buddy, it's fabric. Like, she hasn't got an advantage. But, I stood my ground and everyone was like, fam, chill, it's fine. And then we continued to play. But for me as a kid, like, it is a very intense feeling where you have all these parents and you have all these schools just watching you and everyone's looking at you like, oh my God, like, she's holding up the game because of this. Like, why can't she just take it off, right? And I probably could have. But because of the values that were instilled within me, I was like, hell no, like, that's not how I operate, and that's not what I was taught. And if this piece of fabric is the reason why I cannot play with you or play in this game, I'd rather not play at all.
Wow.
That kind of shaped a lot of, and even my siblings, I think we're all kind of the same, where it's like, if we see something doesn't just sit well or right with us, it's about standing up for what you believe in. And that's what I love about Islam as well, is that we're quite black and white when it comes to what we believe in and what we don't, and standing up for that. Because as an individual and as a leader, whether it's in your community or in the business world, you do need to have values that you believe in. And I think that goes broader than, I think, religious individuals as well. If we look at any of the leaders within big corporates, like they're people who you're kind of intimidated by because they know what they want and they know what they believe in. So I think as Muslims, we're given a very easy opportunity where we're told what we should believe in and what we should value, because that not only is going to help us succeed in this life, but in the hereafter as well.
The themes I'm getting from that are there's a stubbornness that comes from being different and having to constantly defend that or feel like you have to defend that. And I think what emerged from that response, that insight was, you grew up obviously in an environment where it's a Muslim minority place, so there's not many people that are the same as you. But the values are instilled strong enough that you stand by them. They don't sort of dissolve and leave. And so it sounds to me like, so you've always sort of had a path that's been different to others, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I've spoken to and a lot of people that, are visionaries have to tread their own path in a sense.
Correct. Yeah.
They follow a path that's not common in the circle that they're in. And that's really interesting because I think that theme is quite common among entrepreneurs. And then the stubbornness, I think, and the resilience that you have to have in the face of adversity, it's probably one of the most important business skills for someone that's a founder, because it, as you know, can be a lonely place and a place where you second guess yourself. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that it's clear, I think, having spoken to you, where those values come from, which is awesome to see. So going from sort of childhood, growing up in Wagga, nice big family, what took you down the path of Monale? And I'll actually explain Monale. So from what I understand, it's a boutique branding agency, data-driven, and trying to do things differently in a sense to what a lot of other branding agencies are doing. And you've managed to win some really impressive clients. I love the website. It looks great.
Thank you.
And even all the social media posts, I looked at the Instagram, and it's at We Are Monale, Monale. So everyone like and subscribe and follow. And I really love the cleanliness of the brand and the way that you've designed brand identities for your clients. But so how do you go from the Wagga Wagga growing up experience? I think there's a bit in that journey. So please, let us know.
Yeah, talking about stubbornness, I'm still in Wagga. I was like, I'm starting this agency here. I'm not moving. Everyone can come to me. I mean, it wasn't like that, but to make it simple, the journey, like in terms of me becoming resilient, I don't think I was ever always like this. I think I had these situations where I was constantly tested and I had to question myself from a very young age. So I'm talking like from 9 years old. Whereas I find that a lot of people in the city who might be around, like-minded individuals from a younger age, it's probably adulthood around 18 above is when you really start questioning your identity. So I had to do it a little bit quickly. And in saying that, like, it still did take time. Like, I wasn't always the way I am now. So I know sometimes when people listen to entrepreneurial stories, they're like, oh, like it just happened. They had this epiphany. No, we have like, sometimes like God is slapping you on the face like 10, 15 times before you actually get the moral of the story. And so I did my HSC and I did a terrible job at that. And luckily my parents were never really like hard on me for education, because I think I was the youngest kid and they're like, look, we've got 4 that have made it, this one is okay. So they were just like, hold up there, it happens, it's fine. They never really said anything, but my HSC was okay, but I got into accounting and finance at Charles Sturt University here, and I was studying it and I did a year of it, absolutely hated my life. And I was like, you know what, I've always been a person where I cannot see myself spending, like, time is something that's so valuable and we're not guaranteed it. Like, we're not guaranteed life tomorrow. we're only guaranteed what we have today. And I've always had that mindset ever since I was a kid. It's just always been that way. So I'm like, there's no way I'm spending 2 more years to finish this and work in a corporate job to finally make it. So I left my degree without telling my parents. And then we were, I know, and then we went overseas for, I think, maybe my cousin's wedding, and my uncle and auntie were there. We're having, we're having lunch at Monale. I don't know if any Pakistanis know of Monale. It's actually a restaurant, like a franchise. It's closed now, but it's in Islamabad and Lahore, and I think Karachi, I'm not sure. But we're in Lahore, Monale, and that's where I told my parents that I had left my university degree. And because I had dark humor, it's kind of a part of me, they thought I was joking. And then my mum realized that she's joking, and everyone kind of just went quiet. And I don't even know where I really do think it's from God, because I wasn't a very confident person back then, but I had the ability to cancel my calls. And then from there, I mean, I always was into a bit of like creative work. So I had like a photography business when I was 16. So that's when I got my first ABN, but it was kind of like a hobby. And at that point, because I was like 17 or 18, I was like, okay, I need to do something. I can't just not do anything. So I went back into photography full time. And that really was the start of me being, I guess, tested in the business world, because yes, I was a photographer, and I didn't really foresee myself being a photographer forever. The lessons that came with it, like tax, finding clients, making them trust you, making them believe that what you have is of value, knowing that you can deliver, what are the deliverables, contracts, agreements, all these things. That was the kind of the first place where I started learning about business. When I understood that it wasn't something that I wanted to do forever, that's when I kind of got into marketing and started freelancing with some of my business, some of my clients, because it just worked out that they already knew me. And at that time, content creation was huge. So they always needed, like a digital marketing assistant and stuff. So I was dabbling into that, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. And then maybe a year after that, or year or two after that, I started a digital marketing company. And that was at 18, 19 or something. And, I had a team, and it was going great. But I noticed that a lot of companies were like putting massive amounts of money, but they weren't getting the returns that they wanted. And it wasn't because the funnels were bad or blah, blah, blah. It was just they didn't have any unique point of difference as a company. And nor did they really showcase that across the whole experience. And that's what brands are. It's not just, marketing here or a customer journey. It's the whole entire experience.
On that, was that the marketing agencies that were around at that time, they were sort of applying a cookie cutter approach. So they would pump into funnels and, all of that sort of algorithmic, mathematical approach, as opposed to the artistic approach or creative.
Correct.
Approach.
Yeah. And in saying that, like, I totally value and respect the need for data. And I know that you need to be, very objective about where you're going, but there needs to be an essence of, it's a long-term game to get people to have customer retention, to scale your business. It takes time. And it was a very odd approach that was becoming normalized, that if you have a large investment, then your ROI is going to be big too, but that's just a poor guarantee. And that's when I pivoted and created Monale. And you can probably see the correlation with Monale there, was that we understand where companies want to go, and we ensure that we back all our strategies with data. And there's three kind of facets that we look at. And we've created our own philosophy called considered design, which is looking at past, present, and future data, whilst knowing their growth vision, which is all about where do the C-suite or stakeholders, where do they want to take the company? So once we align those things together, then we bring in that creative approach. Okay, how does this come to be in a unique way so that you can stand differently in the market? And that's the premise of what we do now. That's how we got to.
That's really interesting. I mean, the evolution. So we've gone from freelance photography, effectively, which is a hobby more or less when you're 16, 17 years old, realizing that there's value in what you can do with that skill set, applying that to more digital marketing type of work, and then
Yep.
transitioning. So we're talking about how long a time period are we talking between the starting of a hobby photographer who's, then left her degree behind and then admitting that to her parents
Yeah.
is difficult.
Yeah. You
To-
would think it's like a 10-year span, but it was only like 3 or 4.
okay.
Yeah,
How old you
I
are.
moved quickly.
Also,
Yeah.
obviously very young and have achieved a lot in a short space of time. But that's remarkable. I think what's really interesting there is it sounds to me like you didn't really have a safety net because
Mm.
with a degree, I think a lot of particularly subcontinental, perhaps people with subcontinental background,
Yep.
there's an emphasis in the Muslim community and generally that university is almost like a prerequisite to life. As soon as you finish
Correct.
school,
Yeah.
you've got to go into medicine, engineering, accounting, law, something.
Mm.
Because what that tends to give migrant parents is some sense of
Security.
surety that there's a base
Yeah.
that they're not going to be out of a job. But as we know nowadays, given where the world is shifting to with tech, there are no guarantees, and sometimes the labor market feels like it's going crazy, and there's a massive war for talent. Within a few years, it's really difficult to find a job. So it's really,
Mm.
and I think that certainty that people had in certain career paths is probably not as certain anymore.
Mm.
But I
That's
think
true. Yeah.
it's interesting that you took this bold step to exit your degree without getting parental permission, which is
Mm.
bold to say the least.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I guess you didn't really have. It sounds like you didn't really have a backup plan. You were sort of just exploring.
I've never had a plan B. That's the kind of person that I've always been. It's either this, and if it's not working, try something different. But the goal is still going to be the same. And I think the moment that you have a plan B, as in like a fallback option, plan Bs are fine if it's like, okay, this particular way is not working to get to that goal, I'm going to try. That's fine. But if it's like, oh, this idea is not working, I'm going to try completely something different and just not do this anymore. I don't think if you're a person who gives up on things easily, then you're probably not fit for entrepreneurship. And if you want to ensure that you are fit for entrepreneurship, ensure that you can build yourself up so that you don't give up on things. Being hyper focused and resilient in all facets of your life, that contributes to success in this life and the next, and also in your career as well. And if we look at Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his resilience was just, top of the range. It's something that none of us can compare our resilience to. But I think if we look at, discipline is something, like for me, I obviously had a phase where I wasn't really as religious as I am now. But because my mom was pretty hardcore with me when I was younger, about, praying 5 times a day. Even when like I didn't feel like praying, and sometimes I would pray late, or, I just honestly, sometimes I didn't feel like I was connected at all to my religion. But because it became routine practice to me, I just naturally get up for Fajr. It happens. I can't not. And I have this immense guilt if I don't. And I think I remember reading a hadith or something like, even if you're not, oh no, it wasn't a hadith. Some lady was saying that, I don't feel connected in my prayers and I feel very guilty about it. The other person said that the act of you even getting up and doing that shows how much that you care, even though you're not feeling connected at that very moment. That discipline and constantly doing it, that's going to get you to a point where you're going to feel connected, but you shouldn't leave things altogether. And then even as an example of prayer, I think that also funnels into our life. Like, we shouldn't give up on things just because they don't work for the first 10, 15, 20, 100 times. If it really aligns with your values, don't give up on it. That's the biggest lesson.
I think that's really interesting, and I think prayer is a really good example because it's something we do often, obviously 5 times a day. And so, I think all of us have experienced moments where the prayer doesn't feel as sweet as we'd like it to, or compared to another time in our lives. But because it's an obligation, sometimes it's one of those things you do that you're doing because you have to do it. And other times you do it out of love because you're like, I'm in love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're feeling it and you're in that moment and you're in a different spiritual space. And I think that's a really interesting parallel because the requirement is you got to do the work. So you got to pray, you got to turn up for salah 5 times a day, no matter how you're feeling. Sometimes you're feeling really into it and connected and present. Other times you're not, but you still got to show up. And I think that's a really good analogy for success in anything else, like you've just said.
Literally, yeah.
I think that's a really interesting parallel, and I think it's a huge advantage Muslims have because we're using that. We're learning lesson elsewhere in our lives.
As Muslims too, and something that I'm a big believer in now is that just striving for excellence in everything that we do. There's a very big, I don't know if it's like a past decade thing or, always just aim for good, but don't be too overt, don't be too assertive, don't be, it's rude, it's disrespectful. I think it's a very cultural thing. I think you can be humble and a respectful person, but Islam grew on the premise of its excellence. And the philosophers we had, the scholars we had, mathematicians, the scientists we had were all very well educated and excellent people. And I would love to, in any shape or form, assist and network with anybody who has big plans and who's ready to put in the commitment and work to do that. But if we support each other and all support each other to strive for excellence, I think the next generation of leaders that we'll have in Australia are going to be making some pretty bold and big moves. And now more than ever, we need that because we're really lacking it.
Yeah,
we really need it. So I think it's kind of all of our responsibilities to contribute and assist one another to be the best.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really interesting because, as we've previously discussed, the Muslim Ummah and civilization obviously ebbs and flows in terms of its success in the world in a worldly sense as a civilization. And we've probably over the last couple of 100 years felt a bit of a decline with world politics and geopolitical situation. With that comes a sense of sentiment around confidence in Muslim ability. And so we've kind of shied away from being really bold and really assertive and really ambitious and creative over the last couple of years. And our civilization has probably suffered as a result. And I think the world has suffered as a result because, as you mentioned, in the earlier periods of the Muslim Ummah, we had a very open-minded, bold approach. And from that, gifted the world so many amazing things. But I think on your point, drilling that down to something specific and tangible, one of the things that Mecca Collective is trying to do is, 1/3 of our religion is ihsan, the value of spiritual excellence. In the hadith of Jibreel, Prophet was visited by Jibreel alayhi salam. And in that, 1/3 of the religion is ihsan, which is to worship Allah as if you're seeing him, although you don't see him, he sees us. So that's constant striving for excellence in everything that we do is a mandate. It's required. And so I think what you've just articulated is, we shouldn't settle for being mediocre. We shouldn't be shy about being ambitious. And I think that message is really, really important. And I think, one thing we're trying to do at Mecca is to showcase people who are in our community, bold, trying to do great things. And so to the extent you're encouraging people, I think it's awesome. And I think, we really need more of that. So,
yeah, I didn't mention this to you before. I probably should have, but ever since I was younger, my parents had always kind of run the Sunday school here. And we all grew up in that, and a lot of my friends went through that, but it's still actually going on. And I'm assisting in that organization. We've changed it to a not-for-profit. But the premise of that not-for-profit or social enterprise, rather, is to create the next generation of Australian leaders. So, and I wanted to share this because the next generation of young leaders is kind of to shape them. The onus is on us to guide and be a good role model. So I know that we're all pretty focused on our immediate network, but also our children's network. That's very important as well. So if we can support each other from that lens, not only are we going to be covering ourselves for this generation, but the next as well. It's very, very important. And that's also a thing that's pretty close to me as well, because when I grew up here, I didn't really have anybody to kind of support me and guide me. And that's another angle I think as Muslims we should collectively all look at as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting you're talking about the next generation when you're barely in your 20s.
Yeah. I'm thinking ahead.
That's really good. I think, a lot of people that are at that age or at that stage are very focused on establishing their own base and their own network. But I think having that focus or one eye at least
Foresight.
on the future, it's really, really important, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
I'm conscious of our time, but I'd really love to ask you a few more questions about Monale itself. So in terms of the business, so, how many years has it been running for, and what's been the growth sort of seen in that business specifically?
So I would say it's probably been around 3 to 4 years. And the kind of clients that we've had, like, I didn't even touch on it, but when I was starting that photography business, it really started from there, my client relationship. Because they've also seen me grow, and I've, been able to then get referred to other people. But I was handing out business cards on Baylor Street, which is in Wagga, a very tiny street that's our main CBD. And I was just handing it out, talking to people. They hated me, but I was shoving it down their throats.
Yeah.
And that, even though, obviously I don't have the same clients, it was completely different. That was the stepping stone to where we are now.
Yeah.
And it kind of taught me the confidence to be able to go out and speak to people and just kind of speak to them at a humanized level. The clients that we have now are particularly in scaling stages. So they're not new businesses. They're businesses who, I guess, have received either Series C or A, B, C funding, or companies that want to get listed on the stock exchange. So they have big plans. And to be able to do that, becoming an industry leading brand is quite important. So brand differentiation is, I guess, the key metric, the business growth they want to achieve. And Monale, our main focus is to accelerate business growth. So when we work with clients who are in that scaling position, we can actually deliver material support and strategies to ensure that they reach their goals. It's definitely a long-term thing, and we're quite committed and partnered with our clients. But there's like only 4 of us on our team, so we're very tight-knit. And in saying that, it's still the start, so I do have quite a few plans. Inshallah. And my aim is to build a very good, strong network of, high net worth individuals who care about ethical companies, who care about Islamic values, but we can all support each other. So yeah, that's our sweet spot.
Excellent. It's a really interesting stage to engage with clients, because when they're on that exciting growth trajectory towards listing or towards a big investment round, they've got, I wouldn't say one, you probably know better, but they might have a really big opportunity to define their brand, and that's something that can be really lasting. So it sounds like you're coming into companies or coming into businesses at a stage where they can really define a path forward for themselves. So it's really interesting.
Correct. Yeah. And the reason why it was so important for us to work with clients that are in that scaling stage is because they have data that we can actually work with. And we're not able to work with new companies because there's not enough data that we can work from to be able to, deliver an outcome. So for me to say, oh, we can accelerate your business growth, I need to ensure that we can actually do it. So that's why it's a good sweet spot. And I also find when you go higher up the chain, things don't really get done because they're already quite established. And I love working with like-minded individuals who have big plans, just like myself, because it goes beyond relationships for that one business or that one project. And there's so many ways that we all support each other. And that's when I talk about networking, it's not just for my own personal gain, but it's a reciprocated mutual relationship that we can assist each other to grow.
Yeah. So tell me about I'm going to ask you about positives and negatives. So I want to ask you first, maybe with a really big win, or something that, a story around the point in time you knew, okay, this is I'm onto something here, and I know, this is it for me for the next period of time in my life. Like, when did you know
Yeah, that's a
this is
hard
something
one.
that you can stick to?
I guess one thing that this is my own issue, is I never really feel like I'm there. I'm like, no, next thing, next thing. And I'm not really there. But if I look back and appreciate certain like milestones and stuff, I would say like we've had some really cool clients. At the moment we're working with Crescent Wealth, and that's a really, really fun one. And I really find that we're quite like-minded in our values. I was recently nominated for as a finalist for the outstanding young business leader for Business New South Wales, which is a pretty big thing because the category is actually under 35. I'm the youngest. I'm 23, so I still feel like there's a lot for me to do.
You have 12 more
just
cracks at that
yeah,
award.
I know, literally. I was if I don't win this year, it's okay. I got 12 more. But I would say like the kind of networks that I have are people that if I stayed in my corporate job, I would never have spoken to. And I'm talking about CEOs of investment banks or founders or directors of, big private equity firms that, before I would never have thought that I would even be able to get into a room with them. And I've worked with really big brands too out in regional New South Wales, like Nutrient Ag Solutions, which is a stock listed agricultural company. But, even as a Muslim and who's brown, and I can still relate to, white Australians, like we're besties out here. So it's been limitless, like the networks that I have, and they're across all industries. So my biggest success would probably be the kind of people that I've met and I'm networked with. I have a pretty vast network. That would be the biggest thing, I would say.
Yeah, much love. And on the other side of the scale, disaster stories or let's say challenges, because I think one thing that we hear a lot about, even with big figures that are in the public domain, so your Elon Musk or your Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, we hear about all of the this, and we're talking about entrepreneurs, obviously.
Yeah.
We hear about the success stories. We hear about sort of, and it seems to me like it's almost painted as an overnight thing. But the reality is, like with everything, whether it's religious pursuits, any other pursuits, academic pursuits, business pursuits, there's a lot of work that goes in, and there's a lot of, I guess, failure that happens along the way that we overcome in order to reach a goal. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'm really
sure. Where do I start? I will say one thing is I don't think any like entrepreneur really feels like they've ever made it, because it's constantly like this. You never really feel like, I've finally made it. I think it's definitely, you can look back and say, I've been through so much and I appreciate where I am now, but it's a constant journey, right? But if I think of, I remember when I first started, like I had people run away with money and not pay me, and honestly, that still is quite common. You have clients who, I'm pretty sure it's the same in your world, like they're absolutely vile. But the lessons that you learn from there is who exactly you want to work with, and you become a bit more selective about who you work with, and you can pick up on the vibes and stuff. I'm trying to think of a particular story. I don't think that anything's coming to my head right now, because problems are just a part of my everyday. I think solving problems has just become accustomed to me. It's normal.
I guess as a CEO and a founder, your ultimate job is to be the problem solver. Like you deal with all of the you deal with all the difficult stuff that no one else can really solve in the business, and that's kind of what makes you. That kind of defines your role. And so maybe a better question to ask, because there's probably been so many things that you're constantly solving, is what
challenges. Yes, I can think of one challenge. Probably it's not so much tangible, but I would say the biggest thing that sometimes I find would hinder or stagnate my growth. Now that I look back at it, it took me a bit of time to figure out what it was, but self-confidence is something that I think people can overlook. And, it's something that you can do a few therapy sessions, but if you yourself do not believe your worth, and even if other people compliment you and tell you that you're doing amazing, that's really not enough. you need to yourself believe that what you bring to the table is of value. That can be one of the hardest things to do, because sales is a really big thing, and networking is a really big thing as an entrepreneur. And you can't do that if you don't have any self-worth or value. So I would find that on the journey, like I would be at this high peak and then I would have a challenge, or I would come across people who are just, oh my God, and may God guide them. Kidding. And your confidence just goes down completely. Being a woman as well, in a male-dominated industry, because all the people that I work with and network with are directors and founders. Majority are men. Absolutely no hate against that gender at all, but there is biological differences in the way that they conduct business, and the way that women conduct business is a bit different. And so that I would say really I did struggle with. But the more I was very clear and cutthroat on my boundaries as a Muslim woman, and still being assertive and just cutting straight to the chase, that really, I found that my self-confidence grew with Islam. And if I didn't have that, I think I would have been pushed around a lot. So at that level, you really need to have confidence in yourself and never, ever compromise on your values.
That's really, really interesting. There's two things that I found really fascinating. The first is confidence, and Islam's got an interesting relationship with confidence, I think, or the way Islam sort of sets up a model for us to have confidence is interesting, because as a baseline, we're an honored creature. So every human being is an honored creature because by virtue of being a human being, so we're given honor because God says we're given honor. So there's inherent self-confidence in the fact that we are a prized creation and we're valuable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's an interesting thing. At the same time, humility was a hallmark of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so there's always this constant battle, I find, and I think a lot of other people in the corporate world or in business find the balance between humility, confidence, being assertive, standing ground. And I think that's a really interesting balance to try and strike. And obviously our Prophet ﷺ is the perfect model for that. But reaching that is in ourselves is not always easy. And I think the second overlay on that is the fact that obviously, being a woman, the challenge is, I think, multiplied in a sense, because when they seek to be assertive, like a male can, they face an additional barrier because sometimes it comes across as them being unhelpfully assertive, which is a really unfair bias. And so, and this is from, data, I guess, that I've gathered empirically from lawyers that I work with. So our team has, it's almost like a 50-50 balance of men and women in our firm. And the female lawyers find it more difficult because clients say, when I'm being assertive, clients consider me being aggressive. Whereas if a male is assertive and confident, it comes across as just a male trait, which is really unfair. I think that there's an additional challenge for females to manage assertiveness.
That's true. I think now I am completely assertive when it comes to business, as it should be black and white. There really shouldn't be emotions involved, and I have reasoning to say this. Biologically, men and women are different, and when a woman is too nice, that can give a different perception to the male. And if you can read between the lines, there is, I've had instances where it's been taken completely the wrong way, and I've been put in very uncomfortable positions. Now, yes, I don't care how they perceive me at this point. You know what I mean? Like we can all do things. We can be very nice people and people still will perceive us as terrible. But I think what's more important than that is like our own dignity, our reputation, and what our beliefs are. So again, not compromising on our core values. And as Muslim women, like there's been Muslim businesswomen, Hazrat Khadija, we don't even talk about her enough, of how powerful she was, and she went out and proposed to the Prophet, which again, we don't talk about enough. But as women, when it comes to business, and I'm going to completely change. I think they're two different things. Women by nature, we do have a very nurturing and loving aspect to us, that maternal side. But when it comes to business, irrespective of your gender, and this both comes with males as well, it should be very direct and it should be very black and white. I don't think there needs to be any personal or emotional connection when it comes to that. That's where I think problems arise, with agreements, with contracts, with understanding, with assumptions. I think you should always be very direct with that. And I think they might say in the corporate world is, you should always be nice, but I actually don't think you need to when it comes to business. I think when you have colleagues and stuff, always be respectful. But when it comes to you asserting your rights, what you value in, what you need, never ever, you don't need to be nice. Yeah. You need to be direct. Yeah. That's how it should be. Yeah. That's just what I've learned. And it's a bit blunt, and I know that, but just coming with experience, that's just the best way to be.
Yeah, I think it lends an objectivity to the endeavor. And I think you're right. Like, I think when we look back at examples in our tradition, in our Muslim heritage, whether it's male or female, I think that the best examples are the ones that were able to demonstrate savoir-faire, which is that it's a French word, which I don't really love, to be honest, but the meaning of it is really good, which is having the perfect comportment in the relevant situation. So addressing the situation. So if you're in a social setting and you're carrying yourself in front of your parents and grandparents, there's a particular way to be. When you're in a business setting, there's a particular way to be, and I think that's really important to be cognizant of that, and to adjust your lens and behavior accordingly. And I think that's it's a really good point.
Yeah, it's kind of different to what I guess this generation talks about now, is that you should be authentic, you should be vulnerable. No, I don't think you should ever do that in situations when you're in business and things like that. It's the direct opposite. I think to save your vulnerability and authenticity for people who deserve that. And that is your friends, your family, people close and connected to you. And I don't think we should be willingly giving out that side of us to just anybody. I think that's something that should be earned. And even with your networks, that comes with time and relationship building. And that's how people respect you. That's what I found, is the more that I was reserved, but I was direct about what I needed and assisted them. And I'm a woman of man of your word. I'm a woman of my word. I've been told that I had a client once. She goes, "Mariam, what's the word for you're a gentlewoman?" He's trying to say you're a gentleman. So I don't know how to say it, but that comes through our actions and what we do. I don't think, like, you can still get those that reciprocation that, oh, that's a nice person and I respect them, without having to be like emotionally invested, is what I'm saying. It's your actions when it comes to the corporate or business world. Yeah.
So one last question I really want to ask, and I'm conscious of time. Habibi Chicken, awesome branding.
Thank you.
You started a store in Wagga. I want to hear all about it, and I want to hear just the plans for this cool brand.
Yeah, it's honestly a vibe, and I'm not going to be biased, but it's probably, someone said it's the best chicken they've ever tasted in Australia. Not going to say anything. Just read our reviews. But yeah, so that was kind of an idea between me and two other partners. And we honestly, from inception to fruition, took 4 months. I don't know how we did it. But thank God, like, it was all kind of God's guidance with that. We opened up, and the first 2 days we opened up, we sold over 400 chickens. We ran out. We kept running out first week, because it's the first chicken store. There's no other charcoal chicken store here. We didn't know. We were just learning. Yeah. Now, like, we go over 700 chickens a week. Like, it's manic. But alhamdulillah, the plans are to open up another store in Charlotte early 2023. Not early, late next year.
In Melbourne?
So it's not Melbourne. It's actually pretty far away from Melbourne. Sorry. But it's close to where Sydney is, so Sydney people. We won't really go into metropolitan until we really get that brand awareness down pat. Yeah. But we have pretty big plans, and so that's just growing, like, kind of by itself. It is a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but the reason we started it was the premise is to celebrate a hidden culture. And we found that the Middle Eastern culture itself, there was like this, the Middle Eastern culture in Australia is not the same Middle Eastern culture you would find in the Middle East. And I say that the terminology, the language, the way they dress, it's different. Like, and I think Australians, because we're so used to it, don't realize that we actually do have a unique culture here, from like of that Middle Eastern kind of that demographic that we have. So we kind of had a nice twist to it where we want to integrate the culture into just like as a normal kind of as a normalized culture, not a stereotypical bad, icky ghetto vibes. We're like, no, this is something that a way we can bring everyone together and also kind of shine a light on something that's generally hidden or it's stigmatized. So that's how it came about. And we don't really have any plans to stop. We had like 5 stores in 5 years is our plan. But I honestly think it might even be more than that. Inshallah.
Who would have thought charcoal chicken is going to lead to the gentrification of Australian?
Exactly. Who would have thought?
It's really interesting because I think brand is such an important and powerful tool because it can speak a conversation to people, and I think that the recognition of we've had it in the past with immigrants from Greece, Italy, in Melbourne in particular, Italians and Greeks. There's a huge population. And there's a culture. There's an Australian Italian culture, an Australian Greek culture,
exactly.
and that is separate to Greek culture, separate to Italian culture. And I think that it's really important to recognize the blend of that culture because it's something that's born and evolving here. Similarly with Muslims, similarly with sections within the Muslim community, and Middle East obviously are not only Muslims. There's Christians and others as well. So charcoal chicken store. It's incredible that you guys have such a vision for it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. No, it's been a blessing for sure. And it's nice to have Muslim founders but still create something that's for everyone. It's not, for a particular type of person, especially out here. Like we had some Lebanese drummers come down and I think it shook Wagga a little bit to the core, but everyone loved it. There's not many places here where people like us can walk in and feel comfortable. And I've seen people I have never seen in my life, which is a very big thing because for me, I know everybody. Like I grew up here. And now I was like, I don't know any of these people, but they look like me. Like that's so great that it's a place where people feel comfortable to come out. So that's what I love about it. It's total vibe, as the kids say.
How do people find Habibi Chicken? How do they follow the brand on social media? Let us know.
Yeah, how do they? Yeah, we're habibichicken.official on Instagram and Facebook. And we actually have a thing running at the moment to win a whole week free of Habibi Chicken.
Oh, wow.
But we're in Wagga. That's a sad. But we've had people come from Sydney, from Melbourne, from Mildura. We've had people come from Canberra to try our chicken.
If you're driving up to Sydney from Melbourne, there's a couple of ways you can go. And the way to go through Dubbo, and I think it's through Dubbo and Wagga. Is that right?
You're asking someone who uses Google Maps in Wagga. So I'm just going to silently agree with you.
Let's just say that there's a way to get to Sydney through Wagga, and that's the way you should go. No, look, that's awesome. Inshallah, may Allah make it successful and grant you.
Thank you.
And I think, look, do you have a final sort of message? I guess, I think we have so much more to talk about, and there's so many different threads we explore in detail that, we're running short on time because I'm conscious that you have to get back to running the business. So just, I guess, our audience is made up of people who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs, people who are in the journey themselves. We've got investors, we've got observers. To sum up sort of you're very early in the stages of your journey as well. I feel like, there's so much more to come. It's going to be exciting. But do you have a message for people who are looking to do what you're doing,
I think, like I said, I kind of touched on it before. I think the self-belief and having certainty that you can actually achieve whatever you want. When you manifest that, it will happen. Like I that's one thing I do believe in. Um, that God has given you the capabilities as an individual, um, and the honor, like you said, that if you just put your mind to something and do it, it might take you a few years, it might take you a decade, but it'll happen. It's just, do we have our own self belief and the belief in God to have the certainty that we can do it? That's what the real test is, to have that belief. But you can definitely do whatever you want.
Yes.
And like, I did it from Wagga, so literally you can do whatever you want.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Like I said, our prayers are with you, and we pray for your success, and may Allah grant
Thank you.
all the best things in this world and the next. Really grateful for your time, and
Thank you.
really
I
enjoyed.
appreciate you having me. This is really nice. It was a nice, easy conversation. And yeah, no, thank you so much.